Good evening. Welcome to this meeting of the Common Council of the City of Huntington for August 12th at 7 p.m. Prior to the beginning of the business meeting, we'll have an invocation led by myself, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance led by Christy McElhinney. Those who wish to participate may rise at this time. Heavenly Father, we give you thanks tonight, and we ask that your Holy Spirit would grant us wisdom and mercy as we seek your truth and justice in loving service to our neighbors. In Jesus' name, amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. And with that, we will call the business meeting to order, beginning with a roll call. Christy?
Brodicom.
Present.
Chapman.
Present.
Belton.
Present.
Funk.
Present.
Johnson.
Here.
Pike.
Present.
Rensberger.
Present.
Thank you. First item of business on the agenda is a public hearing regarding Ordinance 11C25, an additional appropriation for fire station. With this time, we'll open the public hearing. Are there any members of the public here to address council in person or virtually regarding Ordinance 11C25? Seeing or hearing any at this time, we'll close the public hearing and move along to consideration of the minutes of the previous meeting of July 29th, 2025. Is there a motion to bring the minutes to the floor for consideration and adoption?
So moved. Second.
A motion and second. Further discussion and consideration of the minutes. Call the question in favor of adoption of the minutes as submitted. Christy?
Chapman.
Yes.
Belton.
Yes.
Funk.
Yes.
Johnson.
Yes.
Pike.
Yes.
Rensberger.
Yes.
Brodicom.
Yes.
You. Motion carries. Moving on to reports from committees, boards, or commissions. Charlie, anything this evening?
Nothing this evening, thank you.
Paul?
Yeah, nothing here.
Dwight?
Just a quick note from the Local Emergency Planning Council. It's a good group to work with, one of them the fire chief back there. And our most recent meeting, it just struck me that they were anticipating, so what happens if we start having lithium battery fires because of electric vehicles? Which turns out to be a pretty knotty problem, but they're already working on that before the problem arrives, and I just wanted to commend them for that.
Thank you, Dwight. PJ?
Nothing here.
Todd?
Yeah, Huntington County Economic Development Commission. Today was Mark Wickersham's final meeting with the full board of directors as he prepares to retire September 30th. Mark presented a spreadsheet illustrating the ROI for our county during his tenure at the agency. Some of the highlights are 197 projects representing $844 million in private investments. Employers contributed to create 3,424 new jobs through the projects. Basically, we averaged 200 new jobs a year for the last 8 years with Mark at the helm, which is awesome. The combination of HQ's budget and the use of local incentives combined for $11 million, which led to $844,000 in private investments. For every $1.13 of public support, the private sector clients spent $84 of their own, or 70 times more than the public sector costs. The public dollars per job created is $3,300 compared to the IEDC's $650,000 per job. So we did a really good job of a low cost to bring new jobs in. Manufacturing wages increased by 20%. According to Hoosiers by the Numbers, per capita income increased by 61%. CDIT and LIT income countywide increased 66% with a combination of HQ's budget and the local incentive awards that reflect only 34% of the total availability for use within the county. And the assessed value for industrial projects is 63 times higher than if the land had stayed agricultural. So I would like to personally thank Mark. I know he's not here, but I'd like to personally thank Mark for all the work he's done. We've had quite a few other economic development organizations call us and say, how are you guys getting done what you get done? So it's been a really neat thing. I've only been on it for 3 years, but it's amazing that the group of people we have there, the leaders of the city and the county and the other cities around Huntington County, how they all get together and bring things to get more businesses in town. So I'd like to thank Mark for all he's done, and hopefully we find another good one. So thank you. That's all I got.
Thank you, Todd. Just to clarify, I think I misheard. The economic return on that private investment was $844 million. Is that correct? Over the course of his
Yes.
tenure? Okay. Got it.
Yeah,
Yeah, I misheard. Thank you.
private investments, yes.
Andrew?
Nothing to report.
Dave? Okay. Charlie or Christie, any petitions or comments from citizens this evening?
No, Mayor.
Thank you. Not aware of any old business. For the good of the order, move along to new business. First item under new business is first reading of ordinance 11C25. Chris?
Ordinance 11C25. This ordinance, if adopted, would provide additional funding to the general fund fire furniture and fixtures 1101006451. $3 million for the new fire station.
Thank you. Is there a motion to bring this ordinance to the floor for consideration and adoption?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and second. With us this evening, we have both Tim Foster from Baker Tilly as well as Lisa Lee from Ice Miller. Lisa is bond counsel on this, and so I'd like to invite her to step forward at this time and walk through the process and the workings of this. Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. My name is Lisa Lee. I'm a partner with Ice Miller and be serving as bond counsel on your fire station project. So you have two actions in front of you today, and what we're doing is we are continuing the approval procedures required to finance your new fire station. So your new fire station is approximately 17,750 square feet, 3.5 bays. You've got staff offices. You have living and sleeping quarters for 8 firefighters. So that's the project that we're working on here. Your redevelopment commission has already preliminarily approved the form of the lease agreement and set a date for a public hearing on that lease agreement, which date is September 12th. The redevelopment authority has also preliminarily approved the lease agreement, and they will be ready once the public hearing is conducted to then execute the lease if fall in line. So what we're here for this evening is while the redevelopment authority, because we have to do this as a lease financing because of your debt limit, and I know that Heidi and Tim from Baker Tilly have talked to you about the numbers and the reason for the structure. So the redevelopment authority is actually the issuer of the bonds, but because they are an appointed body, the state legislature says that we want an elected body to approve the issuance and some things relative to the lease agreement and those procedures. So that's what you have in front of you this evening. The first action that you have is ordinance number 13-C-25. We're only asking for introduction this evening. This ordinance pledges any legally available revenues of the city to make lease rental payments. And it's my understanding that Baker Tilly went over those sources and uses and revenues that you have available to you. They have to provide those as well to us and show us that you have at least 125% coverage of those lease rental payments, and that's so that we don't, we're not financing a controlled project. It's a state requirement if you're going to have a petition remonstrance race or possibly referendum. That's a controlled project. So because you have revenues other than the property tax, which is simply a backup to make sure that these bonds are marketable at the best interest rates possible, then they've shown us enough to show us that we have reasonable belief that that levy would never actually have to happen. Okay? So the first ordinance is pledging the legally available revenues, so they get defined as general revenues. So each budget session, you can determine, I know there's some set ones that you're looking at, but you'll be able to determine each year during the budget cycle which ones are available. You've got more of this one this time than you had last time, et cetera. So you will always have that flexibility annually to determine which of your legally available revenues you're going to use. towards the lease rental. Okay? But this ordinance does do an irrevocable pledge. Once the bonds are issued, that pledge is irrevocable. Okay, so a future council could not reverse that. And then the second action that you have, and I'll be happy to go through the ordinance, but the second action that you have is a resolution. The state legislature, because again, the Redevelopment Authority and the Redevelopment Commission are both appointed bodies, there are just certain things that the legislature wants the council to approve. So you are also approving the trust, the pledge within the trust indenture, which is the general revenues. You are approving the transfer of the property where the fire station is going to be built, the transfer of that in some legal capacity to the Redevelopment Authority, because they have to own a leasable interest in it before they can lease it. And then it talks about an exercise of the option to purchase the property by the Redevelopment Commission. That actually doesn't happen until the very, very end of the financing. So the lease rentals have all been paid, the bonds are paid off. What it's basically saying is the Redevelopment Authority now does not own that completed fire station. Yes, they were the issuer of the bonds, they were the lessor, but they must convey the fire station to the city and or whatever title you want that to be in. So those are things that actually happen naturally in the lease agreement, but state law has revised it to say we want the council to formally approve those actions. So that's what the resolution is. Would you like me to go through the ordinance or the resolution? The ordinance is very short. We've got an estimated cost of the project not to exceed $14,600,000. I know you are appropriating $3 million in cash towards that project. So I believe the parameters, and Tim can correct me if I'm wrong, the parameters that we're using in the lease agreement are maximum lease rental amounts. They're not maximum debt service amounts. They're maximum lease rental amounts based on a max bond size of 13.5. Tim, is that right?
Yeah, the parameters are based on no cash contribution on hand, which isn't the case, but in case there weren't cash.
Yeah, so what he was saying is the maximum parameter in the lease is based on the maximum bond size of 13.5, but we know that's not going to be your bond size because you're going to use cash to buy down some of the cost of that project. So what happens once the bonds are sold, so we get through the entire approval process and through objecting periods, because this does provide due process to your taxpayers. They have opportunities to object. We get through all of those periods, and then Baker Tilly goes out and markets the bonds. Once we get those confirmed bond bids in and a chosen underwriter or bank or whatever the purchaser is determined, then the lease requires us to go back in and actually match that maximum lease rental amount to that debt service payment for that year. So we roll it up. So you have a debt service payment. We roll it up to the next 1,000, so it's even. And then we add the annual trustee fees to that. Okay, so that you're not having to pay those out of the general fund. They're going to be paid out of lease rentals. But we true that up. So we bring those maximum lease rentals down to match the actual debt service payment. So you're not just paying a lot of lease rentals that you don't need to that sit in the trust indenture until it's all paid off. That's really all that is in the ordinance. And again, we're only asking for introduction on that. And then the resolution, I believe, is pretty straightforward. It does talk about some of the terms, the bond terms. So at the bottom, you will see, I was right, the 13.5 is the maximum bond size. Maximum term is 20 years, so no later than February 1 of 2045. Estimated cost of the project is not expected to exceed $14.6. And then you go to the next sections. They will be redeemable. They will be callable early. Those redemption provisions get negotiated in the sale. We're saying that there is at least a 5-year call protection for any bond purchaser. So if they purchase the bonds, they're looking at how long before you can actually redeem those bonds early, how long are they protected at those interest rates, and that impacts their interest rates. So if we want it at 5, callable at 5, we're going to get a little bit higher interest rate than if we're willing to accept 8 years or 10 years. 10 years is the so that's just a part of negotiation. You see here the max rate of lease rentals of $825. That's during construction, so we are leasing some existing assets during construction, so we're not borrowing money to pay interest. So you're also saving money. We have put in the documents what is being leased simply during construction, and we have put in the documents that every one of those, as soon as from this, so it's not encumbered for the 20 years. So those are the basic terms that we are happy to answer questions.
Council members, any questions for Lisa? Or any follow-up questions from Baker Tilly's presentation at the previous meeting? Thank you, Lisa. So at this time, we do have motion and second regarding ordinance 11C25 regarding the additional appropriation for the fire station. This appropriation is for $3 million in order to pay down that bond issuance. So any further discussion or consideration by council members of ordinance 11C25? Not seeing or hearing any at this time, we'll call the question in favor of approval of ordinance 11C25 from first reading. Christie?
Felton,
Yes.
Funk,
Yes.
Johnson,
Yes.
Pike,
Yes.
Rensberger,
Yes.
Brottigam,
Yes.
Chapman.
Thank you. And with that carrying on first reading, Director Cutress, for the construction schedule and payment schedule, do we need to do suspension of the rules this evening? We're good to go to the next meeting. Okay, thank you. So council, you'll have second and final reading of ordinance 11C25 at the next August meeting. At this time then, we have first reading of ordinance 13C25. Christie?
Ordinance 13C25, an ordinance of the Common Council of the City of Huntington, Indiana, pledging general revenues to the payment of lease rentals to pay bonds of the Huntington Redevelopment Authority.
Is there a motion to bring ordinance 13C25 to the floor for consideration and adoption on first reading?
So moved. Second.
Motion and second. Further discussion and consideration by council members? Not seeing or hearing any at this time, we'll call the question in favor of ordinance 13C25 as presented. Christie?
Funk,
Yes.
Johnson,
Yes.
Pike,
Yes.
Rensberger,
Yes.
Brottigam,
Yes.
Chapman,
Yes.
Felton.
Yes. And Lisa, just so I'm clear on my timeline, do we need suspension of the rules on that, or we can finish to the next meeting? Thank you. Next item is first and final reading of Resolution 4R25. Christie?
Resolution 4R25, resolution of the Common Council of the City of Huntington, Indiana, approving a lease between the Huntington Redevelopment Authority and the Huntington Redevelopment Commission, and approving the issuance of lease rental bonds by the Redevelopment Authority and other matters related thereto.
Is there a motion to bring Resolution 4R25 to the floor for consideration and adoption on first and final reading?
So moved.
Motion and second. Further discussion and consideration by council members? Not seeing or hearing any at this time, we'll call the question in favor of adoption and approval on first and final reading of Resolution 4R25. Christie?
Johnson,
Yes.
Pike,
Yes.
Rensberger,
Yes.
Brottigam,
Yes.
Chapman,
Yes.
Felton,
Yes.
Funk.
Yes.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is first reading of ordinance 14C25. Christie.
Ordinance 14C25, an ordinance authorizing the City of Huntington, Indiana to fund its Economic Development Revenue Note, Series 2025, and approving and authorizing other actions in respect thereto.
Is there a motion to bring 14C25 to the floor for consideration and adoption?
So move.
Second.
A motion and second. So common council members, we've been working through this issue for quite some time, and tonight we're able to bring a formal presentation and ask to you. And throughout the course of this, we'll have the members of the Flint Creek Redevelopment LLC board that are available here to share with you from their perspective. We also have Eric Doden on behalf of Pago USA that would be a consultant working with them on the project. Lisa will be up to share about the process involved with this and the guidelines and regulations that have been set out in state statute by the State House for us to follow. But before we get to that, I just want to take a moment and share my perspective as I reflect on some of the success of our neighbors to the east in Van Wert. And so common council members may be aware that my previous work had the opportunity to travel to Van Wert from 2017 to 2019 on several occasions and saw a downtown that was experiencing a lot of struggle, like many Midwestern cities. And I saw this peer community over the course of that time, although I didn't realize what was going on, began to make a major reinvestment in itself that was led and paved the way by its community foundation as well as other private sources of dollars. And so back in 2020 then, I got to go on a field trip with Matt Ditzler from our community foundation, as well as Steve Kimmel from our Chamber of Commerce. And while we were there, we met Mr. Eric Doden and learned that while I had been touring their downtown, he'd been working with their downtown and foundation to pull together a model to allow them to regain local control of buildings in their downtown that were otherwise undercapitalized if they were owned by good-intentioned neighbors, or they were overcapitalized but owned by absentee owners who didn't care about the eyesore it was causing in the neighborhood. And they've had a great deal of success with that model, and as a result of it, when we came back, Mr. Ditzler began working with his board of the Community Foundation to transition them towards impact investment funds, and the City of Huntington began working with neighbors in the community to develop the Little River Land Trust so that we might have a locally owned community development organization that could help pull together deals like this. Then over time, as we've seen this opportunity in the course of this last year, we've met with a number of folks in the community so they could hear this presentation themselves. A number of them are here in the room this evening in support of the venture, and so you'll be able to see them and see a lot of familiar faces supporting it. But ultimately, what we're talking about here is using everyday market forces and bringing economies of scale to bear upon our downtown so that we can make sure that the buildings that are in danger of collapse are able to be restored, purchased, and brought back to the marketplace, and that those who wish to not be a building owner and also a business owner, but maybe want to focus on one or the other, this gives them an opportunity to do so as well. So it is important to note, as you've heard from me on several occasions, but just so we're clear on this, it is not the city taking title to these properties downtown, but the city is presented with an opportunity to provide some early patient capital in this process so that the Flint Creek Redevelopment LLC board can move forward with acquiring these properties and bringing them back to life. And so with that, I do want to invite the local members of the board that are present here to step forward to the microphone and introduce themselves. And so council members have a chance to meet you formally.
Jump in since I'm the first to the mic. My name is Matthew Wilcox. My wife Sarah and I have lived in Huntington County since 1995. I'm an accountant by training. I'm also a business person and an entrepreneur, having started on Apollo Caster, that's located on Etna Avenue, started that in 2006. And my wife and I also are the owner of the Moore Corlew building that's at Market and Jefferson, right at the corner of the old Federalist building that was built in 1845. We purchased that when Eric Harmon was ready to retire, and but we sort of followed this model even though we didn't know this model exists. We were doing this before it was cool, you might say. We remodeled the upstairs, put in apartments with the idea that we would be able to subsidize the first floor to some kind of a commercial enterprise that might help the economic engine of downtown. And so my heart is kind of in this project.
Hello, I'm Sonia Foraker. My daytime job is at Parkview Huntington. I was chosen to be a part of this organization, and it's an honor. Lived in this community all my life. I've got to help out my daughter and some of these son-in-law's business downtown. So we get to see the individuals that are coming into our community, that come into downtown, looking for more. So I think that and we appreciate the support and looking to improve the community and do different things that we could be a local venue for people to travel to. I think this past weekend was a prime example. People will travel, and I think it would be bigger and a better event as we continue to grow our communities. Thank you.
My name is Rick Baker. I was born, raised, and lived 90%, 99% of my entire life in Huntington. For 30 years, I was a part of Baker & Sons Construction Company, a local commercial general contractor, a company who ironically had a lot of involvement in the redevelopment and historic restoration of the LaFontaine Center, the old hotel. I hope that my involvement in that project, along with my professional life in the construction industry, would help lend a hand to being a big part of this development. I've been fortunate in the fact that I've been able to travel around the country, and I've been to small communities that have redeveloped their downtowns. I've seen what can be done. We've all seen Roanoke. We see what Wabash has hear what Van Wert, and I'm excited to be able to take a trip and look at that. But I've seen other communities do that same thing, and I often leave them thinking, why not Huntington? I was given the opportunity to go through the presentation, and I think you've all seen that Mr. Godin's put together. Got extremely excited about the model, how that can happen, how that can work. And I thought, this is how Huntington. Happy to be a part of this, and would very greatly appreciate your help in getting this kick-started and all of us collectively being able to put Huntington back to what it needs to be, should be, and once used to be.
Good evening, I'm Jim Scheiber. I'm a lifetime Huntington resident. I do not lease or own property downtown, but maybe someday I might. I have been involved with the downtown for probably 15 years and doing all the planners and the baskets, and making its appearance look nicer. So, when people come in on Indiana 5 and they come down the hill past St. Mary's, it's a focal point of the city. And so, like was mentioned before, a lot of communities around us, certainly Roanoke, Wabash that was mentioned, even LaGrow, have tried to revitalize their downtown. So I'm certainly behind this project in principle.
So council members, these are the board members of the Flint Creek Redevelopment LLC. In addition, Joel Buzzard is also serving on that board. Just want to invite you to have a chance to ask them about their involvement in this. Keep in mind that they've just organized as a board the last 2 weeks, and so they are drinking from the same fire hydrant we've been drinking from the past few months. But we've got more time on the nozzle. So council members, just invite you to ask any questions you have for the board members.
Not necessarily a question, but Tanya, I loved your comment about this past weekend downtown, seeing everybody down there. Downtown was packed, and that's exactly what it should be. I mean, it was an amazing turnout.
Anything else for the board members?
Not to date anybody here, but 25 years ago, Rick and I served on the school board together. And actually having served with him in this kind of environment, I can tell you, my confidence level has gone through the roof on this project with Rick sitting at the table. His experience in construction and his excellent decision-making, I think, will lead this to greater heights. So I'm glad to see you involved, Rick. Thank you.
All right, well, before we segue then, board members, I invite you to take a seat. Before we segue to have Mr. Doden up to present, again, just the high-level framework and how this model can work in other communities. And again, this is just modeling. It is not, there will be different elements that change based on the research that's done on the properties here in Huntington. But I do know there's a number of folks in the community who have been through the presentation, are familiar with this. By quick show of hands, just to indicate if you're here in support of the proposal, could you please raise your hand? Could you raise them higher, please? Thank you. We want to, we don't want to put the physical therapists out of business here. So, and if there's those, just to be honest in disclosure, if there's those who are in opposition to it, could you also share your hands? Okay. So at this time, I want to invite Eric Doden back up to the podium to answer questions about the capital stack and the model and the complexity of some of these development deals. Kevin, at this time, if you could also assist him with getting to the right presentation.
Good to be here. Thank you for having me. Every time I drive into town, I salivate over this building stock and the opportunity that we have here in Huntington to do something I think very special for this community. Being a small town kid, I'm very passionate about our small towns and bringing them back to life in a way that, I really view as that we're stewards of these assets and that we have a chance to make these assets, once again, very special and completely redeveloped from the ground up. And I think that's a really great opportunity for us. So I'm excited to be here with you, try to answer any questions that you may have, and we'll go from there. Do we need to go through the presentation quickly, or have we already done that enough times that we're good to go? It's up to you, Mayor. Refresher.
Do it.
This is the team. We work with Model Group. If you're familiar with The Landing, they've been the primary developer of The Landing. That's where I got to know them. Not only do I appreciate their work, but as importantly, I appreciate them as people and human beings. And what we all know is the small town challenge, and so we're going to go through that challenge briefly, the model, how it works, financing benefits, Q&A. What we've seen throughout most of our small towns is, on average, a small town has 100 buildings. 80% of them are underutilized or under-resourced, and 20% minimum are usually owned by people outside the community that have do not necessarily have the same affinity for the community that we do. That leads to deterioration of the buildings, and of course with shared walls, it means that if one building is deteriorating, almost all of them are in the process of deteriorating, regardless of how good you've restored your building. We saw this in Van Wert a great deal with buildings that were restored 100%, but next to buildings that were not. That was impacting the restored building, which ultimately leads to a lack of community pride, population decline, and decline opportunities. One of the things that excites me about the restoration of these buildings is 75% of what we fix, our goal is to have it be housing. And given some of the changes in state law as it relates to the funding of local government, where you lay your head is going to matter more and more as we shift to more of a LIP model versus a property tax model. And then that leads ultimately to declining opportunities. So the solution that we've developed is to form a local trust company. A trust company is a fancy word for a 501c3. People ask me all the time why we call it a trust company. Well, part of it is when you call it a trust company, you're giving a sense of longevity, that you're not doing this as a quick fix, but this is going to be a long-term trust for the benefit of the community. It's also local ownership, but 501c3s do not necessarily mean that you won't be profitable. We have 501c3s throughout the state. Hospitals are a good example where they're highly profitable as a 501c3, but the benefit of those profits go back to the community, and that's the benefit of this model. So by acquiring the buildings under one trust company, we're then able to restore them, manage them, and create opportunities. What this does is returns control to local leaders. revitalizes your core assets, and leverage tax credits that currently go to big cities. So one of the things that we found in this model is that when your project is 25 to 50 million, you're able then to absorb the cost and also obtain the tax credits that the federal government generally gives, like National Historic tax credits, New Market tax credits. Almost all the state tax credits have gone to big cities. Only one, I believe, in history has gone to a small town. We're now able then to tap into the state tax credits. And let me also just say, because of how aggressive that Huntington's been and other communities like Huntington in terms of this model, we're also getting attention all over the state of Indiana with statewide leaders. I spent the day yesterday with statewide leaders who are helping us raise a fund. The governor's office is very excited about what we're doing and helping us raise a statewide fund that would help finance these. We're also getting high net worth families at the regional level interested in a fund. We're working on the private placement memorandums, which is the Securities and Exchange. This is a way for you to not register your fund, but to use the law allows for a private placement memorandum. Taft is drafting that for us for statewide and local funds. And we're getting a lot of attention with people that are willing to also bring additional patient capital. That will take some time for us to put into place, but we're excited about the progress we've made so far on that. So how our model is different, the normal development model is the developer owns the buildings, the developer then acquires the tax credits, and then the developer fixes the buildings, and then ultimately within 7 years, they flip the building for a profit. That is the normal model. Our model is quite a bit different than that. We have the local owned company, trust company, acquire the buildings. They are the owners, so this board that you saw is, they are responsible for the decisions of the company. That means that all the tax credits that you give, whether it's local, state, or federal, go to the community, not to a developer. And then all those profits stay locally within the community, which is what is exciting. Statewide leaders, as I talk to senators and state reps and even the governor, they're so excited about this model because I think, if I'm just going to be blunt, they're tired of giving tax credits to developers who then flip the product and make millions of dollars off the flip. And sometimes when they flip it, I mean, to be fair, they're not always flipping it to a person who will maintain it in the way that we want it to be maintained. So our advice and counsel in this model is that once you as a trust company own the buildings and have restored them, that you own them in perpetuity for the benefit of the community, and all the profits over the period of time will benefit the community. Not necessarily make a developer have a nicer house in Naples. That was a joke, but kind of true. So our process is that we spend the first 12 to 24 months acquiring the building. So one of the things we'll go through with the trust board is trying to figure out which properties we feel like should be acquired. That process takes 12 to 24 months because when you're working with owners, it's often a process, helping them understand the benefits. Some of them want to sell quickly, some of them want to take their time, and that's fine. By the way, we see all the owners of buildings as our partners. They're not our competitors. We see them as people that love the city and love the community. But oftentimes, if they're getting ready to retire or they have a change of life or a change of business or a need to just run their business and not manage a property, they are excited about this opportunity to sell to someone that's going to care about it in perpetuity. Once we own the buildings, then we're able to do design and financing. So one of the things, I'm not going to bury the lead here, we're going to talk about is underwriting, which is a fancy term for pro forma. We do have and continually do underwriting, but we do not have enough information right now to do precise underwriting, because until you know what building you own and how it's going to be utilized with your design firm, your architects, your engineers, and how much of it's going to be residential versus commercial, we will continue to do underwriting throughout the process and throughout the project. One of the things I tell all of our people that when you have underwriting, it's a tool that allows you to hold your operational team accountable as they lease up the space. So for example, if you've underwritten all the square footage to $1.50 a square foot, and they're leasing it at $1.40 a square foot, you're able to identify very quickly that you have an operational challenge where maybe what they're doing is trying to get it leased faster, but they're leasing it for less money than we as an operational team want them to lease it. So this is a tool that's constantly fluid and flexible, trying to make sure that we maximize the finances of this, but also keep in mind that sometimes as a trust, we'll make a decision to forego some rents because it's the benefit to the community. So maybe there's a a commercial space that we want or a private space that we want for the community that we'll charge less of a lease to because it benefits the community. The nice thing about the trust model is we're not out to maximize profit, but we're out to be responsible stewards. And so we will continually come back to you with underwriting, sit down with you and help you understand like what we're seeing as we get further and further down the path. The third part is then construction. Once you are able to obtain the tax credits, the debt, and the patient equity, we're able to then have a close. And that's when you're really going to be able to see the progress of the construction as we fix the buildings. Generally, our goal is to fix 10 to 20 buildings at a time. One of the things that's very real is construction fatigue. That's why we not only is it a benefit to the community to go after tax credits by doing 10 to 20 buildings at a time, but it reduces the fatigue. Obviously, if you're doing 10 buildings every 2 years versus 20 buildings every 2 years, you have a very real sense of construction fatigue that we can begin to eliminate by doing it more efficiently. And also, there's usually cost savings when you're doing, more properties at the same time as well. Then the fourth component, is property management, where we hire a responsible party they're designed to rent the property, collect the rents, make sure that everything is taken care of. If there's a problem with the property, a problem with the roof, or whatever else may be going on. And then the final is event planning, where once you have the restored property and you've curated, some of the commercial, retail, restaurant space, you have to drive events that then drives people to come from Fort Wayne all over the region to spend money in your town. And obviously, as you restore this community, and we've seen this, look at how many people spend money on the landing today versus 5 years ago. Let me just say, there was no money being spent on the landing a few years ago, and now today, the amount of money that goes on the landing every day is unbelievable, and that's exactly what we hope to see here in Huntington. So I won't go through Van Wert. I will go through this real quick, just to give you an idea of what we've seen as a trend. These are all by month, how many buildings we were able to acquire, so you can see that there's a spike at first, but then mostly the average is 2 to 3 buildings a month. And so just to give you some context of what we see as a general rule of thumb, but every community will be different, and we'll certainly be producing these kind of charts for you guys to understand how we're doing on a month-to-month basis. If we were to do nothing, what we know, according to the demographers, is that we are slated to lose 8.4% of our population, which is obviously not a positive thing for us here. So one of the things that we believe, especially given your proximity to Fort Wayne, is that this will make you competitive for people who do not want traffic in the big city lifestyle to move into Huntington, which I think will be a benefit to you, the entire community, and to your downtown. We also are showing you, this is sort of one zone that we have looked at as an important zone. In that zone, there's 136 buildings we've identified, 2.1 million square feet, and 22.7 million of assessed value. General rule of thumb is that you can buy the property for 1 to 1.5 times assessed value. So that gives you kind of a big picture idea of just how many buildings that you have and how many square foot that we have the opportunity to, over time, revitalize. And then we give you a sample, and keyword here, sample financial capital stack. One of the key things that people want to know is if you're going to do a $50 million project to fix 20 buildings, how do you finance that $50 million? This is where you get National Historic Tax Credits. That's a by right program of 20% of the project. If we're eligible for new markets, we will apply for new markets. If not, we are going to look at additional state tax credits and opportunities, as well as TIF and other tools that could come into play. I also want to point out that because we're a 501c3, we're able to tap into national and regional and local foundations. And there's a lot of national foundations, if they're private, have to, by law, give away 5% of their corpus every year. And so since we're doing this in the fashion we are, we're able to apply for those grants. And those are grants. Those are not, they don't have to be paid back. We also then get bank debt of $10 million, and then we have patient equity of $10 million. And again, we've talked about a statewide fund, a regional fund, and then local patient equity that will help build that capital stack. But I promise you, without a shadow of a doubt, if someone's going to blow a hole in that $50 million capital stack, it happens every deal we do. We get to the end, and we have 45 out of 50 million, and this is where the art comes in. So everything I've told you about so far is more science, but the art is the creative way that you solve a gap. And that's where guys like me have the most fun. Like, I don't really have fun with the easy stuff. I have fun with the hard stuff, but it takes a great team together to make sure that we fill that gap, and that's where everyone, all hands on deck, because once you get to 45 out of 50 million, it gets a lot easier to get to 5 million to get it over the top and get it closed. At least that's what we've seen in our background in history. So this is the Renewing Cities Fund I just told you about, where we're raising a statewide fund in partnership with the governor and Sagamore Institute, and there'll be more to come on that. I'm not going to go through that. Even I'm confused by that slide. But somebody asked for it one time, and we gave it to them. This is where we're showing you that most of the state tax credits have not gone to small towns. They've gone to big cities, and we're going to rectify that. And I think, frankly, I mean, I'm talking to statewide leaders. They are very excited about what we're doing and how we're bringing renewal to our small towns. I mean, they're not in any way, even some of my most tough to please, state senators and reps are excited about what we're doing. And I will also tell you that we just spent a day and a half in Michigan with the family that is turned around Detroit. And they're excited about this model because their model that they turned around Detroit with, where Dan Gilbert invested $7 billion in downtown Detroit in property, is not really replicatable, as they say. And so this model they see as being able to, our model we're using in Indiana, they can use even in their markets to help with small towns all over Michigan. And so we're starting to see all different kinds of states come to the table and look at this model as a model that they can use to help restore communities, not just in Indiana, but in other states. Now, having said that, selfishly, I want Indiana to be first and best. Just saying that out loud for the fan club here. And then we're working on legislation, and we will be coming to you and asking you to help us promote this legislation. This will be specific to small towns. We talked to the General Assembly about this last session. They were very excited about this, but as you know, with the General Assembly, it's a process to get this legislation passed. So we're going to keep knocking on the door until we get it done. But I will also tell you that communities like you and Richmond and Bluffton and others that are doing this activity is helping us drive the narrative with them and show that this needs to be done. Thank you for your efforts in helping us make that happen. I've already really talked through the benefits, and so I'll just open it up to Q&A, and if there's any, and then we'll go.
Eric, before council members have questions, a previous question that came up, and I wasn't comfortable answering it because I couldn't remember for sure, but Indiana communities that you are either in dialogue with or actively working with already?
Yeah, so we're actively working with South Bend. We're actively working with Richmond. We're actively working with Tipton. We're actively working with you, Huntington. We're actively working with Bluffton, Auburn, Butler, Hillsdale, Michigan. We're actively talking to right now proactively, believe it or not, next to Butler is Edgerton, Ohio, that also has an interest in this model. And there's about 23 cities total that are in different stages. Really what we're doing right now is, our team is trying to do, we want to service the clients that we have. And so we're trying to help other people understand the model so that we can attract, what we call friendly competition. Because we have 85 county seats. Our goal is to restore 85 county seats in 20 years. And to do that, we're going to have more people like PAYGO USA. But we're setting up the model for everyone else to follow. And so that's kind of the role that you're playing. You're actually setting the pace here in Huntington for cities all over the state of Indiana who need to do this. Some of them are, Richmond's been very aggressive. They've lent $5 million to their trust company, and within the space of 2.5 months, we have 100,000 square foot under control. We have 2 buildings that would be 150,000 square foot that we believe are possible to get control even by Thanksgiving. So guys, think about this. Under 5 months, we will be in control of 250,000 square foot in downtown Richmond. That is a remarkable progress in such a short period of time. And that's what we generally see is once we get the patient capital, we're able to get aggressive and work with these communities to gain control over some of these distressed assets and then more quickly, put a deal together to get them fixed.
Council members?
So given this $50 million project, it looked like based on your model that approximately 10 million is on tax credits, 10 million is on like historic tax credits as well, correct?
Yeah.
In the event that we can't get those tax credits or we're not eligible for those tax credits, how do we overcome that gap in this project?
Well, again, the National Historic is by right. So as long as we follow the rules of the National Historic, we're able to obtain the tax credits. The ones that are more of a beauty contest or you may not be eligible as new market, they're also my least favorite. They're the most expensive tax credit and the hardest to deal with. So if I can avoid them at all cost, I will. And then we're also, looking at the state tax credit, which is not by right, but they are actively encouraging us to put these deals together. So, obviously I cannot speak for the state of Indiana, but I do know this: when you come to the state of Indiana having purchased 20, 30, 40, 50 buildings, they're going to want to be a good partner to you. So, once you get the state tax credits, then, you begin to look at grants, from national foundations, statewide foundations. Remember, private foundations have to give away 5% of their corpus per year by law. So they're actively looking for projects to be a part of. And then you get, even more creative with, with some like TIF and some of the other tools that, exist today, or maybe we'll have to ask for tools like the STOY that will give us up to 30%, that the state would then pass that law. So we have been very creative in terms of finding ways to fill the gap. I can't, can't tell you all the ways, but because there's $200 billion of foundation money in this state. Let me repeat that. $200 billion. It's considered a sovereign wealth fund to have $30 billion. We have plenty of money. Our problem has not been money. Our problem has been execution and vision. And that's the problem that we aim to solve. We have the vision, and we're going to execute relentlessly, and then we're going to dare people to tell us no. And I know that sounds a little, whatever you want to call it, but that is what I do. We dare people to tell us no, and they don't. Oh, by the way, just to remind you, we have a 15 no rule. So if they tell us no the first time, we go back to them every 2 weeks, and they always say yes on the 5th time. And even people that know my 15 no rule have told me they're going to say no 15 times and said yes on the 5th time. So we're very persistent. We find a way to fill the gap, and that's what you have to depend on the team for. You have to have confidence in the entire team, you included, that we can find a way to fill the gap if we have one. Great question, though.
So then Pago or Flint Creek will be able to solicit more capital coming in just to fill the gaps? I mean,
Yeah,
I know
we're
that
gonna-
will be the seed money, but there's got to be a lot more money coming back after us, correct?
Yeah, we're going to proactively, look at all the different options, including, like I said, additional state tax credits, foundations, high net worth families. That's part of, what we do, is to try to figure out, how do we fill a gap that presents itself. And guys, in every deal I've ever done, there's a gap, including ones that only have debt and equity. Sometimes the gap was, we needed 50 million of equity and we could only raise 13 million, and we had to figure that out. Oftentimes the gap ended up being the banks, where we thought we were going to be able to borrow 32 million and they gave us 30. That creates a gap, and you got to go figure that out. So this is partly of what we all do in this business, is try to figure out, when the gap presents itself, how do you fix that problem?
Realistically, through state funding or state grants or credits, do you think that there's $10 or $20 million in capital to be had?
Yeah, I mean, I can only tell you what I'm encouraging statewide leaders. Like, I'm encouraging them to go after these statewide and national foundations for money for additional READY dollars. So one of the things we haven't even talked about in this capital stack is a READY program that is gaining still a lot of attraction and momentum, in the state. So you look at READY dollars, you look at tax credit, like the regional development tax credit dollars, and then if we can get an additional program like the Small Town Opportunity Initiative, that's up to 30% for a small town. So some of the tax credits exist today, and I think there'll be more coming online for our small communities in the future. That's my personal belief. Now, I'm not the legislative body, so part of that was we have to go to them and convince them together, right? But part of the way you convince legislators to do this is by showing that you're willing to invest in yourself and showing activity in action, and then they're excited to help you. I mean, Van Wert had the same question. You know, there was not a clear pathway with the state of Ohio on all their tax credits. And I literally remember telling their board, guys, when we buy 54 buildings in downtown Van Wert, I'm going to dare the Ohio General Assembly to tell us no, and they could not tell us no. I mean, first of all, I mean, who walked in to the Ohio General Assembly having bought 54 buildings in the downtown of a town of 10,500 people? Like nobody. So sure enough, they gave us what we needed to get the job done. Now, can I promise you that? No. But I'm very confident in our ability to get the job done as a team, collectively.
Council members, further questions?
I want to thank the mayor for thinking out of the box, going out, looking at places to find a way to make Huntington better. Appreciate you guys volunteering to be on the board. I think we're going to have a good team in there. Thank you for the presentation. I think I was going to buy the car from you when you first started talking, but that's a whole different story. We got the banker finally done talking, so I thought I'd say something. But yeah, I'm excited about it. Anybody that wants Huntington to be better, the city to grow, and that type of thing, I'm all for that. So that's all
You know, I think it's an innovative program that you've proven some success. I'm curious about how things are structured. So Pago, you do the legwork. Our local board just is oversight and consults with you on how things evolve. But we're relying on you to do a lot of the work, right?
Yeah, we do a lot of the operational legwork, but the board, from our perspective, is the representative of the owner, and the owner is the trust company. So the board is the owner from our point of view. So if the board says, no, we do not want to buy a building, we don't buy a building. But we do all the legwork to make sure that we try to acquire a building that the board wants to acquire. So if they pick a series of buildings that we want to acquire, our job is to go out and knock on the doors and try to find out what price that they'll sell at. We also give advice as to what we think is fair based on the market. And then their job is to either approve the price or tell us, like, we want to renegotiate that price, but ultimately they have to approve every decision as a board. We do not make the final decisions on anything. By the way, that also includes who you hire as an architectural firm, who you hire as an engineering firm. All these decisions are approved by the owner. The owner is represented, the board represents the ownership of this entity. So if de facto, you as a community with your board own the company, but it's a private, I want to be crystal clear on this. This is a private sector driven, you know, we are in the business of buying and fixing and restoring buildings and then trying to make sure that we have good cash flow from those buildings.
Thank you.
When you first went into Van Wert, was there a lot of hesitation from building owners or business owners? Obviously, you showed the chart. There was that spike up at the very beginning, a little bit down the road too. Were those business owners asked at the beginning, hesitated, and then came back later?
All the
Came back to the
above.
table later?
All the above. There were some business owners that were super excited because their spouse definitely wanted them to sell that building as fast as possible. And you know, the spouses are always the great, you know, the great part of this whole thing. But there were some building owners that said, I want to think about it, and we're very patient with them. And then there were some that said no, and then a life event happened, something changed in their life, and they came back, and we're grateful to have the opportunity to close, because the one thing they know is two things. We're going to close fast, so they're going to be able to get whatever it is we agree to quickly, which helps them in their personal life, because obviously if they're coming back with a life event, there's generally something not good that's happened in their life, a death in the family, you know, something that happened in their business. And so it helps them to be able to get the capital out of the building quickly. You know, but the second thing is they really feel good about the fact that they're selling it to the trust company that's going to be for the benefit of the community and not to somebody from out of town that they're not sure what they're going to do with the building. Because most of the people that own buildings, their heart and soul is in that building. They want to know that somebody cares about it and is going to maintain it in perpetuity, and they're excited about being part of selling it to the trust company. So we've had all the above. We had one gentleman that I think what he did, he liked is just meeting with Eric Long every week. And so he waited for a long time to sell his buildings, but we finally just patiently persisted. He had, this is downtown Hillsdale, he had 4 key buildings that were kind of holding up the project. But, you know, he was in his 80s, he was not in a hurry. So we were just patiently persistent, and we finally, in fact, the CEO of the hospital bet $1,000 to Eric Long that he would never sell the buildings, and now the CEO owes him $1,000 bucks. He's still gonna collect on it, I'm gonna make sure.
So you've done a good job of telling me like a 30,000-foot view. I kind of want like a 10,000-foot view if possible. Seen the model, it looks like it can work, but from a 10,000-foot view, what kind of specifics can you give us about Huntington specifically? We have a $2 million loan, you know, withdrawals of $500,000 up front, which is perfectly fine, but do we have buildings that we're targeting already for that $500,000 to be used right away?
Yeah, so we have a series of buildings that we'll be working proactively with the board on to get their, you know, sort of final decision to prioritize them. Obviously, we like buildings that, we're gonna also advise them. We have like buildings that are, you know, consecutive in order because it allows you to do a lot with hallways, with elevators, with things like that. And then some of that will depend on how the owners respond to us, right? So once you start knocking on doors, you know, you might have 5 that are yeses, 1 in the middle that's a no, not yet, and then, you know, maybe 2 in the middle that are not yet, and then 4 that are yeses, and then you got to try to figure out, all right, what are we going to do, you know, about the middle? How do we work with those owners to produce a situation that's a win-win so that we can, you know, get the best benefit possible for the elevators and the things that we want to put in these. So I do not have specific buildings. I did not come prepared tonight with specific buildings because that is part of what we'll be working on with the trust board, but we're happy to come back and report on a regular basis, you know, what buildings we're targeting and why. And the other thing, frankly, is, you know, this is a market-driven situation, so we're trying to be a little careful with, you know how this game works. When they know you have capital, all of a sudden their building is worth, you know, 20, 30% more than maybe we think it's worth. So we're not trying to hide anything, but we're also very, you know, we're very specific with building owners that we're not going to overpay. And so, but, you know, there is a bit of a negotiation, shall we say here. It's not that people are just going to roll over and walk in and say, you can have my building for whatever you want. That's typically just not how it works. So it's going to be an ongoing iterative process.
Have you ever tried to name a building after somebody to get to fill the gap?
Hey, naming rights is a real thing. Like, we know this, right? I mean, universities have used this forever to fill gaps.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there's nothing wrong with thinking about naming rights.
Further questions from council members?
So if we approve this, I assume second final reading would be at our next meeting if it passes tonight, right? So this is for you and for the Flint Creek Group. What are the sort of the top 3 things that happen next after final approval, if it happens?
Yeah, so once it's approved and our contract is signed with PAYGO, we begin the process of going out and working with the board to identify our top prospects and then knocking on doors and begin the process of putting those under contract. Depending on the owner, you know, sometimes you have to close a little faster than you want. If we have our druthers, we try to close on a quarterly basis. So that way we can, you know, get a group of buildings together and make the close more efficient. But sometimes, you know, if the owner is in a certain situation and they want to sell, they need to close faster, we can accommodate that. So our goal would be to go out once we have approval from you on the patient capital and begin to actually knock on doors and begin to get them under contract and then close them no later than 90 days, you know, from the time that they're under contract, and if necessary, faster than that.
So by January, there would be some properties
We certainly hope so.
under control. Okay.
That is what we aspire to do.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
Further questions at this time by council? Okay. Thank you, Eric.
Thank you.
So Dwight, you teed it up. So if council moves forward with the ordinance 14C25 this evening, there will be second and final reading at the next evening, as well as an advertised additional appropriation for the actual sum of the loan. So at this time, before we hand things back over to Lisa to talk a little bit more about the structure and process with it, I do want to mention to council tonight that we do have 2 of the EDC members that sat through the presentation this morning, and that committee spent about an hour and a half working through this process and looking at it before making a unanimous recommendation to council this evening. So I want to acknowledge Sarah Kemp and Matt Capoza, who are in the gallery with us this evening. And so with that, then, I want to hand things over to Lisa to explain a little bit about the statutory process for how the city would move forward in this case.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. I was actually asked, after all of these presentations, how can the city provide funds for this initial capital, $2 million to assist with this revitalization? And after talking through it with Mike and what you're really trying to do, where the funds might come from, the first statute that came to my mind is one of the most recognized statutes in the state used for incentivizing projects, and that's the Economic Development Commission statute. You hear it called the EDC bond statute. And typically, you would see bonds issued at the very end of it, but you're not required to do that. And in fact, the powers under the EDC statute explicitly say that you can make direct loans to users and developers. And so we go through the same approval process that we would go through to eventually issue bonds under the incentive to a developer through the bond proceeds, and that's how we get the funds in. But a lot of communities, and Eric talked about Richmond. Richmond has used, they're obviously working with PAYGO, but outside of PAYGO, Richmond has also used this statute numerous times, not only for the issuance of bonds. They have 2 big developer projects going on downtown right now, but also as forgivable loans. So you can do loans, and if you can do loans, you can forgive the loans. So they've set theirs up with certain benchmarks to be able to forgive those loans. So there's a lot of communities, Elkhart, Goshen, South Bend. Eric also talked about South Bend. I work with South Bend with this statute and with the loan process quite often because they like to incentivize the low-income housing project. So whenever a developer comes to them with a low-income housing state tax credit, they go through the process, the application process, they review the project, and ultimately the gap. There is always a gap, and they talk about the gap. And then they go through this process. If the project warrants it, they go through this process and eventually issue a loan to this developer with various benchmarks, et cetera. So it is a statute that is used quite often, but people think of it as a bond statute, but it's also a loan statute. So that is the recognized approval process that we are using for this particular loan. We did have an EDC public hearing this morning, as required by the statute. The mayor was referencing it. I was virtual at that particular meeting, but I was very impressed with just the comments, the questions, the dialogue that was going on between the EDC members and the Flint Creek Board. I'm not used to an Economic Development Commission that actually has some duties and takes control of certain things and meets on a more regular basis. So that was fairly new to me, and I've been doing this 29 years. So they're very well versed in the projects and what to do. So I thought their questions to the Flint Creek Board were very good. But even as a board that's only been around for 2 weeks, I thought their answers were quite good as well. And what we're trying to do in this ordinance, not just to authorize the $2 million loan, we're looking at 4 different tranches of $500,000. We're just trying to keep flexibility in here. It doesn't right now, from a timing perspective, we talk about August 26th would be the final approval that we would be looking for here. If that happens, it doesn't mean that on August 27th, Christie's writing a check per se for the first $500,000. You can decide what the appropriate time to sign the documents and provide that first 500,000. And then you can also decide under what conditions you provide the additional 500,000 tranches. Because right now, that is not set in stone as to how that has to be. So we're trying to keep the flexibility in the loan agreement for the council to make those decisions, see the PAYGO plan. Once they've been hired, they're under contract. The board is working with them. They have a plan, they have priorities. I think you will have an opportunity to see additional information before the additional tranches are actually proposed. So we have the ordinance in front of you today. The terms are basically in Section 3. They are not to exceed $2 million, 5-year loan at 5%. The mayor mentioned something this morning in the EDC public hearing that I thought was a very good point to bring up, and one of the reasons that we've tried to keep the flexibility. In this type of situation, there's a balance, and you're always having to look at the balance as to protecting the city and the city's $2 million, but also making a situation flexible enough that they're going to be able to go out and take this seed money, do some things with it, and then use that to help fund additional pieces of the gap, way beyond the $2 million. So we talked about, will this be a secured $2 million loan? Will it be unsecured? You can make that decision individually on each $500,000 tranche. Are we taking a mortgage on any property? What are we doing from that perspective? But if we do that, are we hindering potentially their ability to finance some gaps? So we have to think about that as you go through the process. So we just try to keep that flexibility here in this ordinance. So you'll see that it says it can be secured or unsecured obligations. So it's either secured simply by the promissory note, that is a contract that they would have to adhere to, and there could be a breach of contract if they don't, or it could be more secured with some type of mortgage or some kind of property security. But again, we're not asking you to make that decision for the entire $2 million or from the get-go. So we're trying to provide you that flexibility, because this is going to be a fluid situation. But it's very exciting to hear what the options are and what the possibilities are. I'm happy to answer questions. I'm just the mechanic of how you do it, how you financially get this $2 million in there. I think Eric and the board have a lot of good things to say about what you do with that money.
Board, council members, any questions for our mechanic under the hood?
So then with each draw, we would have the option to go ahead and agree as a council to do it unsecured or secured, correct?
Well, I think it's going to come down to what properties are they looking at initially? Are they looking at any with the first 500? How many are they looking at with the second 500? What would the options be, and what makes sense? What property might make sense to try to put a secured mortgage on? So I think but I do think you would have that opportunity.
I want to thank you very much for clarifying all that for me, because it was clear as mud for a while there. I understand what, I understand. I thought we were just going to write up a carte blanche check for $2 million. And thank you very, very much. I appreciate that.
Thank you, Lisa. Council members, any further question or discussion regarding ordinance 14C25? Okay, not hearing any at this time, we'll call the question in favor of ordinance 14C25 on first reading. Christie?
Ike?
Yes.
Rensberger?
No.
Brodigan?
Yes.
Chapman?
Yes.
Felton?
Yes.
Funk?
Yes.
Johnson?
Yes.
Thank you, and as previously noted, that'll come back for second and final reading at August 26th, along with the additional appropriation for the overall loan. Next item on the agenda this evening is first and final reading of Resolution 3R25. Christie.
Resolution 3R25, this resolution of the Common Council of the City of Huntington, Indiana, authorizing the investment of public funds pursuant to IC 5-13-9-5. This is for our investments that we do through Baker Tilly Wealth Management, and we just have to do this resolution every year.
Is there a motion to adopt Resolution 3R25?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Further discussion and consideration of 3R25?
Local banks have an option, Christie, correct?
Yes, they
Okay.
take it out to bid.
Perfect.
Further discussion, consideration? Not hearing any at this time, we'll call the question in favor of adoption of Resolution 3R25 on first and final reading. Christie.
Rensberger,
Yes.
Brotticam,
Yes.
Chapman,
Yes.
Felton,
Yes.
Funk,
Yes.
Johnson,
Yes.
Pike.
Yes.
Thank you. Next item is first reading of ordinance 12C25. Christie.
Ordinance 12C25. This ordinance, if adopted, would amend Section 78.01E, Traffic Schedule 5, one-way streets, alleys of the City of Huntington, Indiana's Code of Ordinances concerning the alley between East John Street and Roach Street.
Is there a motion to bring that to the floor for consideration of 12C25?
Second.
Motion and second. With this ordinance, then, who do we have here from senior leadership to present?
I tried to look this up. I couldn't find it. Okay. That's what I thought. No, I would.
While Kevin's pulling that up, this is an alley that the city, both myself as well as Chief Boxell and Superintendent Bischoff got a request on looking at as far as one-way traffic. Currently, this alley, which is just north of John Street, immediately south of Catholic Church and School there. We got a request to turn this into a one-way alley. There's been a lot of complaints from some of the residents in the area, as well as some multiple close call accidents from vehicles trying to go both ways in that alley, specifically at Jefferson Street, as people are either pulling in and others trying to pull out. So what we looked at after talking with some of the residents that use that for their access to their immediate houses right there, there's several driveways off of that alley. The consensus was to make it a one-way westerly alley, so you would enter it off of Warren Street and exit onto North Jefferson Street. So that's the ordinance that's before council tonight.
Questions by council members?
So have there been accidents, or is it just an inconvenience?
There have been a lot of near misses, not actually physical connections, but it's kind of a blind intersection as you're pulling out of the alley.
Yeah, 'cause you're downhill
as
and
you
you
get
got
to
that wall
Jefferson.
there.
Yes.
So is this request from the people that live in the houses,
From some people that live in those houses
or
right in
from
there.
somewhere that
Yes.
almost got hit?
From Paul.
From people that live there.
Okay.
They are some that have almost got hit, yes. A little bit of both.
Venn diagram is overlapping.
Yeah.
So the implementation of it would be after the second reading
Correct.
and/or when Jefferson gets unblocked?
Potentially, yes.
That's the only thing I'm concerned
Understand.
about, that timing, because they're coming through pretty hot and heavy, back and forth on each direction these days, so
Yes.
I'm all for it.
Yeah, that's
Oh,
your
he lives
bid.
closest to it.
It's like right across the street from my house, so.
Further question or discussion by council?
Even though my wife is upset about, because that's where she would turn to get the house.
You might not want to be on
Let the
public
minutes
record.
recognize that, that cross you're
Saying.
gonna bear.
Yeah.
You're being recorded, Paul. You're being recorded. It's on TV.
All right, further questions germane to the topic of traffic flow? Not seeing or hearing any at this time, we'll call the question in favor of first reading of ordinance 12C25. Christie?
Brodigan,
Yes.
Chapman,
Yes.
Felton,
Yes.
Funk,
Yes.
Johnson,
Yes.
Pike,
Yes.
Brensberger.
Yes.
Thank you.
You're on the record.
Moving along to miscellaneous items, Christie, the clerk treasurer, July budget report and financials.
Yes, the general fund balance, as of the end of July, we ended with $10,609,000. Motor vehicle highway fund is 1.9. The restricted fund is 756,000. Park fund 241,000. Airport 195,000 and landfill 91,000. I show that the seated 5-year plan, ending in 2028, we've, year-to-date spent $647,000 this year. All of the funds seem in good order. If you have any specific questions about anything, please let me know.
Any questions for Christie on the financials? Okay, one other item under miscellaneous for the good of the order. Mr. Ditzler, would you please stand? So I want to recognize Matt Ditzler is our Community Foundation President and CEO. He has been instrumental in the reconstitution of our Main Street organization. And for those of you who were able to attend Saturday's Tenderloin Festival, you were able to see their hard work pay off. This was their first event. The attendance estimate currently that you guys are working off of is, I'll brag for him then, because the win was considered 500. I'll give them at least 3,500. I've heard as high as 5,000. So it was a great event, very well run. So I just want to publicly recognize the efforts of the Main Street Board, and thank you. And with that, is there a motion for adjournment?
So moved.
Second.
Motion and second. All in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Thank you, everyone. Have a good night and great week.